So the presentation that we're going to go over today focuses on effective instruction, specifically for middle school, since that's what we're working with. And the aspect I decided to focus on for today's PD was creating independent learners. I think most of us started making shifts towards that when we decided to do personalized learning as a county. So I felt it was appropriate for us to go over. So the quote I picked for us to start with is, "It is not what you do for your children, but what you have taught them to do for themselves that will make them successful human beings." And our objectives are, so instructors will understand how to create units and unit resources that will foster an environment where students can become independent learners. Instructors will discuss how to create a classroom culture where independent learning can thrive. And instructors will explore tools available to assist students in becoming independent learners. So the first aspect is unit planning, and that aligns to Objective 1. So there's two main things we really need to focus on when we go in to do our unit plans. First, that there should be an appropriate level of rigor built into the curriculum. And second, that instruction, student tasks, and assessments are all standards-based. If we can't say what standard is tied to a lecture or an assignment or an assessment, we probably shouldn't be giving it. So there's a lot of discussion about rigor. We hear the word rigor all the time. So what does that actually mean? So I want us to do a think, pair, share now. You don't have to write anything down. So just take a minute to think about, what does rigor mean to you? What does it look like in the classroom? So if you were to enter someone's classroom, how could you tell what the students are engaging with is rigorous? And how do we know a task or assessment is reaching the appropriate level of rigor? And I want you to specifically think about appropriate, since many people think rigor just means difficult. So there is an appropriate level to that. So take 1 minute to think about that. Then I will have you guys talk together, and then we'll take a minute to share up. And you can probably pause.
I think rigor is providing students with stuff that's going to challenge them without over-challenging them. You want them to be able to take it to the next level, but you don't want to just give them basic computation work all the time.
Definitely. You want to make sure you've got something that's going to at least push them to not just understand a simple part of the task, or it's not a simple part of the standard, but actually start being able to see how that fits into the curriculum as a whole.
Yeah, or apply it in a different way with other standards and strategies. Your job perfection.
Okay, great. So the purpose of I wanted you guys to think about rigor and talk about rigor is because we need to be including rigor from start to finish when we go to plan our units. I always backwards plan. So that starts with unpacking your standards and creating your learning objectives or learning targets. So last year, we got this tool, Kudo. I don't know if any of you guys still use it or if you've kind of moved away from it, but it's a really good tool just to remind us of what we already know to do, right? So we start with our standard. We start by listing what we know about the standard, or what students need to know about the standard, or what they might already know, what they need to understand, what they need to do, and then in the other, we want to include any of the students' misconceptions or possible misconceptions they may have. After you do the Kudo, you need to be considering how you will evaluate students' performance as they work through the unit. We need to think about this while we're planning, because we need to tell our students how to reach those desired outcomes. And we need to make sure our instruction and the assignments they're working on throughout the unit are reaching those desired outcomes. We never want to be those instructors where the students get the unit test and they say, "I didn't do this, we never went over this in class, I didn't know how to do anything." So our checkpoint should also be throughout the unit. We should be consistently checking through formative assessments whether or not students are reaching the desired goal for each objective as we move through. And of course, make sure we are planning with the end in mind. A good way to make sure students know what we expect of them, and that way they're not caught off guard when they do get those summative assessments, is actually getting them involved in the planning process. So students should be able to unpack their own standards. They've been doing it as young as kindergarten. There's no reason in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that they can't unpack their standards. And we have tools to do it. I personally like to use a KWL chart to have my students unpack, but there's also other graphic organizers we can use. So I have a copy for you guys. The first one is just a basic graphic organizer where students list the standard, they list what they have to know and they define it, and what they have to do and define it, and then they rewrite the standard in kid-friendly language. If you look on the second page, there's a KWL chart, but it's been adjusted so that students can unpack the standard. So it starts with what I already know about the Common Core State Standard, what I would like to know, what I would like to learn about the Common Core Standard, and what I learned about the Common Core Standard. So that way students are tracking their learning and also know what they should be learning, so they're not caught off guard, and we're very clear with our expectations as they work through the unit. When we are creating our learning standards, or we are presenting our learning standards at the beginning of a lesson, we should be referring back to these. We should be telling our students to look back at these KWL charts, to look back at their unpacked standards, so they can see for themselves how the objectives we are telling them at the beginning of class tie back into the unit standards they unpack themselves. And this also allows students to start creating their own learning objectives. Students can start seeing things that they're interested in each unit and doing their own level 4 learning goals and objectives that'll take their learning above and beyond and make them more invested in what they're learning. So just to summarize with unit planning, instruction, student tasks, and assessments should be standards aligned and reach the full intent of the standard, and they should be appropriately rigorous and require critical thinking and be connected to the real world. Students should know what they will be assessed on and how they will be assessed in order to be successful when they are doing those assessments. So when I say know what they're going to be assessed on, that is why we have them unpack their standards. That is why we refer to the objectives and the standards throughout our lessons. When I say how they will be assessed, we do need to provide them with rubrics and learning scales so it is very clear to them what they are going to have to do in order to be successful from beginning to end. The second objective aligns with creating a learning environment to foster independent learning. So we can have our students unpack the standards, we can give them the correct learning targets, we can make the assignments rigorous enough, but if the learning environment itself isn't a culture or in a comfortable way where students can be ready to be independent learners, those student tasks aren't going to be completed, students aren't going to be successful, they're not going to be independent learners. So in order to succeed, we must first believe that we can, and that includes our students. They must first believe that they can be successful before we hand them all these rigorous tasks and assessments. So we have to work towards creating a growth mindset in our classroom. We have to set high expectations and not lower them for our students. And we also need to provide the necessary scaffolding, accommodations, and resources for our students. Because we will have those students that may not be able to reach our high expectations at first without the necessary instruction and additional support in order to reach that level. So I want you guys to do a 1-minute quick write, and I want you to write down anything that you can do or say in the classroom throughout the year, because it should be ongoing. We don't want to just do one growth mindset lesson in August and then just never talk about it again. To help foster growth mindset in an environment where students believe they can be successful with effort. So just take 1 minute, there's sticky notes on your table, and just write down what you think we should be doing as instructors to help our students feel like they can be successful with effort and adopt a growth mindset. Okay, now we're going to look at our third and final objective, so tools for our learners. So we already talked about how making sure that our lessons and our units are already aligned to the standards and the appropriate level of rigor. And we've talked about how to build an environment for our students, for them to be successful. So now we need to talk about the actual the tools we're going to provide our learners with that's going to enable them to be independent of us and be able to learn without us always being there to spoon feed them the information. So the best teachers are the ones who show you where to look, but don't tell you what to see. So we need to keep in mind as instructors that our students should be the ones active in class. They are supposed to be active learners. They should be doing a majority of the work. Teachers are more facilitators, providing resources and guiding students using higher order thinking questions and collaborative tasks. So we really need to get more comfortable with stepping away from the whiteboard and not using a majority of class time any longer to talk. Our main goals and focus should be on setting the focus for the lesson, so providing our students with the learning objectives and the criteria on how to be successful with them, and providing some guided instruction, especially for those students who need the guided instruction. The rest of the time really needs to be spent on students collaborating with each other, helping each other learn and grow, and students independently working with themselves and by themselves seeking the information they need. So what we can provide our learners with that will help them in learning by themselves is strategies to determine what they are learning and how to track their progress. So we already talked about one of the tools we can use, the KWL charts and those graphic organizers to help them unpack the standards. We also have capacity matrices. So many teachers, I'm sure most of the teachers in this room, are already using capacity matrices. The ones I'm going to pass out, one of them is for 8th grade math, and the one stapled to it is the science 8th grade capacity matrix. And capacity matrices show our students what their learning targets are. It has the objectives listed on it. It shows them how to reach those objectives by listing different resources to gain knowledge, as well as resources to practice the knowledge. And it tells them how to demonstrate they've mastered those objectives by listing what their formative assessments are going to be and what their summative assessments are going to be. They also can be used to help students become more accelerated and go beyond the standards. So for example, in the math one, there's a level 4 listed, and that has an opportunity for students to create their own learning objective that's above and beyond the standards and demonstrate that knowledge once they've found their answers for the objective they've created. Other tools we want to provide our students with is tools to assist them with self-evaluation. It's no good if we have a class of students all working by themselves, going through the unit, going through the standard, thinking that they have mastered it and are experts, and they really haven't. They don't know what they're doing. One of the best tools we can give students for self-evaluation is assignment rubrics, as well as effort rubrics. So effort rubrics can be used daily in a classroom, and effort rubrics help students to see, are they being independent learners? Are they doing everything that they can to learn the information when they don't understand it? Are they doing everything they can to go above and beyond and prove and demonstrate what they are doing? So I've given you 3 different effort rubrics. If you look at the first one, on the left, it shows their effort on a 1 to 4 scale, with 4 being, I worked on the task until it was completed. I pushed myself to continue working on the task even when difficulties arose or a solution was not immediately evident. I viewed difficulties that arose as opportunities to strengthen my understanding. So using an effort rubric like this really puts the ownership on the student and makes them ask themselves and be honest with themselves, am I putting forth my best effort to be an independent learner? Am I truly trying my hardest to seek the information, practice the information, and find resources for assistance when I do get stuck? The second one I gave you is one of my favorites. It's an effort rubric specifically for test preparation. So you have kids all the time who tell us, I studied, I don't know how I failed. Well, this one specifically targets that. So a level 4 on this effort rubric is I reread the text and compared the text to my notes, adding to my notes as needed. I sought help from others when I didn't understand and met with a study partner to review and discuss my understanding of ideas. And the last one is an achiever rubric. This one's quite large. I'm not going to read this one to you. If you want to, you can take a minute to look at it. This one covers student self-confidence, goal setting, motivation, organizational skills, and study skills. So it not only helps students evaluate themselves to see if they are doing the most that they can, but it also gives them clues and cues to what they could be doing in order to do the most that they can. The third thing we can provide our learners with is options how to obtain and organize new knowledge. If you look at that math capacity matrix for obtaining knowledge, there wasn't just one thing listed. It didn't just say direct instruction or lecture from teacher. There were 3 options given. Students had the option to either read the text with an advanced organizer, to watch a video and summarize the video and write Cornell notes to go with the video, or to seek some other outside resource in order to obtain knowledge for that learning goal. So when students have the options to obtain and organize new knowledge the way that they want to, it again creates ownership and makes it possible for them to be independent learners and move at their own pace. The fourth thing we can provide is tools and SOPs for working through complex problems and projects. So when we do give students these rigorous tasks and these complex projects, we need to make sure we're also providing them with different tools to achieve them. I haven't passed it out to you guys yet, but there is a problem-solving framework on the shared drive that we in the math department in particular can be giving our students when they have difficult problems or problems they don't know how to start. That helps them organize the information, pick a strategy, and have them work through the complex problems. When we're assigning projects, we need to make sure we are chunking them and scaffolding them in a way where students are working through them in a logical progression and can keep track of themselves through the project instead of just handing them a rubric with directions and letting them go. The fifth thing we can provide for them is feedback. We all know the feedback cycle and we all use it, but we want to just make sure that we're continuously using it, that we're continuously giving our students written or verbal feedback, and not only that, but giving them the chance to actually apply the feedback. So it's no good if you're telling a student, oh, you failed the exam, these are the ones you got wrong, but not giving them the opportunity to either correct that exam or do a different task, showing that they went back, they remediated the skill, and now they have mastered it. And the last thing we can offer them is the opportunity to work at their own pace. So when students have the opportunity to work at their own pace, it puts them in charge of their learning, it makes them responsible, they have to own it. It is on them to make sure they're going through the standards, they are learning the objectives they are being told to learn, and they are actually mastering the standards then, because we are not just forcing them to go through, we are not just giving them a deadline saying, well, by this date you better have these objectives mastered. When students can work at their own pace, they can focus on mastery and they can reach real achievement. Any questions, comments, or concerns? And any of the documents I gave you out today are already available in the shared drive. Okay, thank you guys.